Hello everybody, welcome to Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video, and check us out over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you would like to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. We're trying to hit 150k subs on this channel, so your subscription would be much appreciated. With that said, we got hot takes to get into. I missed last weekend, unfortunately, because I was out of town. We're back. Let's get into these takes. From Christopher O'Connor. I typically try not to read takes that are quite this long. I appreciate being tactful and short with your words, but this was a very good take, so we're gonna make an exception, or at least a very well thought out take. I will get into it. So from Christopher O'Connor, the concept of this guy couldn't play today / back then is stupid, specifically in regards to all-time greats, because people think of eras like 10-year segments instead of realizing that the evolution of the game is always gradual. Kareem played against Wilt and others 60s greats, but he also played long enough to go against primarily 90s guys like Hakeem and Chuck. LeBron came into the league in the dead ball era and wasn't a perimeter shooter in any sense, but as the style of play evolved, spacing increased, and the demand for a perimeter shot became more mandatory, he adopted. MJ came into the league in the mid-80s, but was still effective at the age of 40 against guys that would go on to dominate the 2000s. Yeah, that's the thing that always gets me as well, and this is primarily just chalked up to the LeBron versus Jordan thing, but like this idea that LeBron and Jordan played in this fundamentally different era when really the 90s and the 2000s in terms of play style are probably about as close as any two eras are throughout NBA history, especially back to back. And also the 2000s, there's just more talent. There were more all-time greats in the 2000s than the 90s. Part of that is just because MJ dominated guys so much. But MJ was, before he got an injury, at the age of 40, all of his athleticism's gone. He's pretty much just his mid-range jump shot at this point. He was still like a top 15 NBA player prior to that injury at that age, playing the year before LeBron's rookie season. Complete side tangent to that. I've always wished that Jordan would have played just one more year so that LeBron and Jordan actually could have had a direct overlap, but it's literally one season apart before LeBron's career actually starts. And like, do you think things changed that dramatically between 1998 and 2008? They really didn't, not in terms of play style that much. A little bit more three-point shooting, but still very far from what it would be. Dead ball era, ISO, defense first, still posting up big men for no reason when they had no post skill, but it was just like, we got to do post-ups, that's what we do. Like, it's not that far removed. And, you know, you can pull someone that LeBron played in the 80s. There are guys who played in the 80s who made their way into the 2000s that played against LeBron James, and LeBron did fine against them. There's an argument. I mean, that's also some Twilight years shit, but still, like, it's not as disjointed. People, like exactly what you're saying, just cut it into these 10-year increments when these guys overlapped in many ways. And it's like, if what was Jordan's competition at the end of his career is also there for the start of LeBron's, I don't understand how you can make this argument of some massive talent disparity. Let me continue. To a certain extent, all the greats had to change with the game in their time, and they were able to and still be effective. That's why they are greats. So when someone says MJ / Magic had no three ball, they would suck today, it's just a disingenuous statement to make. Also, since you specifically pointed out Magic, I do want to make this point. Yeah, his second to last season in the NBA, he shot 38% from three on 3.5 attempts per game. That's in 1989. Do you know how many three-point attempts that is per game? In fact, I'll even find it. I'm willing to bet you he was up there in the three-point makes list that year. Yeah, Magic Johnson was 5th in made threes that season, with Craig Elo, Dale Ellis, Byron Scott, like actually great shooters behind him on that ranking, just for the record. Like Danny Ainge, Reggie Miller, Mark Price, and Michael Adams, who I don't know much about. 5'10", led the league in three-pointers. That's fucking cool. But that aside, shout out Michael Adams, I guess. Magic also, like, there's proof that the shot could have been developed if it was necessary. And that bothers me a lot. Like, first of all, you don't need a three ball to be dominant in today's NBA. Giannis doesn't have a three ball, and he's still, at worst, the third best player in the NBA, and I think he's second. If you had a time machine and just plucked Magic straight out of 1985 to 2025, he would struggle because he's missing out on 40 years of history and adaptation. But if injury and age was not a factor and Magic was able to play through the evolution, he absolutely would evolve with the game as needed because of his all-time talent and work ethic. I rarely see anyone say Hakeem couldn't play today, but I regularly see people say Bird couldn't, even though they played against each other in the 86 finals, and Bird came out on top. We've seen guys like Blake Griffin or Brook Lopez completely reinvent their play styles mid-career to adapt to changes in the league style of play, but people aren't willing to give someone like Magic, Bird, and MJ the benefit of the doubt that they could have done the same thing if age was not a factor. It makes no sense. I think that the all-timers should all be given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to these kinds of discussions. People just like to pick and choose who would be okay and who wouldn't to fit their own arguments and agendas. I also think this applies to older greats like Russell, Wilt, Oscar, West, Baylor, etc. Yeah, so the thing is, a lot of this take punishes people for just existing at the time that they did. Like, there's really nothing that you can do. This is an argument that is employed by disingenuous actors because it's kind of hard to argue against, because they're always going to have played in the time that they did. All this what-ifism, it's like it's hard to rebut. Is that rebut? Is that a right way to say that? Refute, because there's no evidence one way or the other. I do think, like, role players from the 60s, 70s, and most of them in the 80s, a good chunk of them in the 90s, a good chunk of them in the 2000s, and even early 2010s couldn't play in today's game. I think guys towards the bottom of the bench were there because there was just less people making the effort to be in the NBA than there is now. It was less global. It was less well recognized. The NBA wasn't even a major sports league until like the 80s, and probably more towards the mid 80s. So, like, yeah, I do think there's an argument that, like, they're playing plumbers or whatever the fuck, although that's extremely reductive. There is some validity there. The actual all-time guys, the people who dominated those guys, maybe they wouldn't dominate the same way they did. In fact, I would bet that they wouldn't. But to say that they wouldn't be good, to say that they wouldn't be great, to say that they wouldn't be some of the best players in the NBA right now is silly. I also think that the top of the line talent in the NBA, like the top 10 players, I don't think the top 10 of different decades has been substantially better since the 90s. Like, the 10 best players of the 90s and the 10 best players of the 2020s thus far, I think you could even argue that the 2020s is better, or is worse, rather. I actually think the top-end talent was able to dominate and be so clearly above the rest of the fold because those role player level guys were worse. But truly, if you were a multi-time perennial all-star in the 80s, and that same player was allowed to develop throughout the 2000s to play their NBA career in the 2020s, they'd still be good. They'd still be very good. They'd still be all-star level, more likely than not. The butterfly effect is real, and there's always weird shit that gets in the way. Who's to say? But yes, what Christopher is saying here is fantastic. I've spent a damn third of the video on it at this point, but it's 100% the case. I think you can use the lesser quality of the role players in that time to diminish a little bit. If you really want to do that, that's fair. But if you're taking it all the way to they wouldn't even be good, you're stupid. All this nuance, I decided to be as reductive as possible at the very end there. Okay, from Krilpy. This isn't really a hot take, but I will highlight it because it's true. Moses Malone won 3 MVPs, but is barely talked about, and most people only know him for his rebounding. That's just true. Moses Malone is definitely among the most underrated players of all time. there's a case to be made that he was kind of like in terms of the way that he played, the way that he moved on offense, there was a lot of overlap there with Joel Embiid, weirdly enough. Like a dude, he wasn't that big, not nearly as big, but the fluidity that he played with and the physical presence that he was, like, yeah, if you have not looked into Moses Malone, I recommend you do it. I also specifically recommend that you look into the 1983 Philadelphia 76ers because that is one of the most talented, dominant teams of all time. I think they lost one game on their way to a championship. From technically the center of thou, I don't know. The three-point revolution has made the game better, not worse. Viewership has declined concurrent to the rise of three-point attempts per game, but that's correlation, not causation. The higher volatility of the three-point shot means less predictable games because at any point, any team or player could conceivably just get hot or go cold, which means more comebacks and upsets. It's a more exciting product. The decline in viewership is a very complicated issue to which nobody has the answers, and the prevalence of threes is just a convenient scapegoat because it's the thing that's most aesthetically different from basketball of the 90s and 2000s, conveniently ignoring the fact that the league was more popular in the 2010s than the 2000s, right when the three-point revolution began versus the peak of the dead ball era. Yeah, the 2000s actually had its own struggles with viewership, mostly just because Michael Jordan wasn't there anymore, but also like the way that viewership is divided up, whether it be there's multiple different streaming services, which is currently the case, or a lot of people are just streaming the games illegally. At the end of the day, the viewership is broken up a ton. I also think the NBA has done horrible marketing, horrible work on their aesthetics and graphics. The fucking content farmification of NBA jerseys deeply upsets me. And I think the branding of it all, I think all that stuff is fundamentally important. I also think the way that the game is sold to you is incredibly important. And the media, whose job it is to narrativize and pitch you on these players and these teams, has done a shit job the whole time. The NBA actually, I think, was doing quite fucking phenomenal at the start of the three-point revolution. Like, the Warriors versus LeBron was a very key driving force in getting people to pay attention to the game. The recent years, it's gone down in part, and mostly to me, because of the broken system of watching the games and the players not being marketed properly. That's not because of three-pointers. I do agree that the game is better for it, but I also have the perspective of I enjoy pretty much every era of NBA basketball. Can't say I'm a big fan of 60s stuff. There's not a lot of fun there, but like even some 70s teams and players I really like. The 80s are so fun, especially Lakers versus Celtics, obviously. The 90s, I like the physicality and the slow pace. I like basketball so much that I enjoy it in a variety of different fashions. But I do like the modern game more, where there is just simply more options and a faster pace. The reason that I've always loved basketball, it ties back to my ADHD. I have a shit attention span, and I find it hard to, like, if I'm watching a football game live, I'm tapping out like halfway through. I can't constantly be paying attention to that, especially with just how sparse the actual play that's happening. I also can't deal with like super low scores. Like if I watch hockey or soccer, aka football, if I watch those games and it's been like 15 minutes and no one's scored, I lose my mind. So like I inherently just enjoy a higher paced version of basketball, but it's still a much higher paced sport than almost all of the other ones. So I also think a big part of this and the scapegoating of the three-point stuff is that the game from the past gets packaged as better than it was, because we are removing the actual experience of sitting down and watching the game, and instead it's people talking about how they felt about what they watched back then and comparing that, which is this highly skewed and biased look at things that cuts out a lot of the negative, and they're comparing that to watching a game today. The amount of people who say those types of things. Like the NBA was so much better in the 90s and 2000s. In terms of the actual basketball, very few of those people are actually regularly watching games from that time. I do that a lot during the summer. It's one of my favorite things to do, to just waste some time, sit on my porch, watch a 1990s game, or 19 I've been watching the 1984 finals recently. Like, I think if you really love the game of basketball, whether you're an old fan or a new one, you should do that. But so many people, whether it is the old heads talking about it or the modern fans who shit on the old game with that, we're done with the 90s stuff. I just think so much of that stems from literally just not watching it. Like, if you watch 90s basketball and you're like, oh, hell yeah, Andre Blatch is getting a post up right now. Yippee. Like, no, there's so much that you can criticize and hate on that era of basketball for, just like you can now if you really want to, but they're different flavors informed by the time that they're in. And stop being so whiny about things being the way that they are. It's fucking lame and annoying. From Guga. Kevin Garnett is the ideal guy to be on TV right now. He's funny, he gives everyone credit, he's just recent enough that people all ages know him. He won everything, and from everything I've seen, he knows the game well. I agree 100%. I fucking love every time I see a clip of Kevin Garnett. He is extremely funny. I have always enjoyed his passion and energy. He's one of my 5 favorite NBA players of all time, so I loved his game. In fact, for a couple of my first years where I was covering the game, I didn't really know as much about him as I should have. And when I learned how much of a fucking monster he was in Minnesota, like, if you're talking about watching old basketball, go watch prime KG highlights. It is so fun. He was so ahead of the game. I think his 2004 season, he had a better mid-range season than like most of Dirk's best mid-range seasons, while also being a freak of nature on athlete and a DPOY caliber defender. And also a great playmaker and ball handler as a 4. Dude, Kevin Garnett as a player is so great, but also his personality is phenomenal. And he gives everyone credit. Exactly what you were saying. Like, he has not been the dude to just shit on the game as it stands constantly, which pisses me off. So yeah, I really love KG. I hope he gets a more forward-facing position. Like, he should be one of the biggest faces of NBA media right now, and he's kind of not. All right, this one is about me and my YouTube channels, so it's a little meta, but I actually do want to get some of your guys' thoughts on this, because I've had mixed feelings as well, and I would love to hear feedback. While I am this is from Brian McDermott. While I am not even close to a branding expert as a subscriber, there is something off about your new Deep Dive with Rusty Buckets channel name change. It kind of sounds more like a spin-off podcast rather than the high-quality scripted long-form content that it is. Also, while the channel icon looks good, when you look at it closely from a quick glance, it looks a bit cheap. I'm open to being wrong, but those are just my thoughts. Some of the channel branding was a little bit... what's the right way to say this? It was just done to be kind of a filler, and we have not filled it in since. I have mixed feelings, because I always felt like the Rusty Buckets being in the name would be fine. I also, the free throw merchant video talking about SGA, that one did poorly, and I couldn't tell if it was because of the channel name or just because people don't want to hear anti-Shea hate propaganda. But the Shaq video did well. I don't know. There's a part of me that also feels like this channel started doing better after we got rid of the "also" in the name. But I don't know. I do want the long form content to do the best, and in the most recent case it did. But I can see why it's confusing to people. The other thing is, like, I think we only really made a community post about it rather than a bunch of update videos, which maybe would have helped clarify it more. I also feel like the Rusty Buckets coming at the end of it makes the YouTube algorithm push it to the end. If you just look up Rusty Buckets on YouTube, this channel and then Little Rusty Buckets comes up first. So there's a couple of different angles here. I also like the name, and I like the idea of branding it beyond just Rusty Buckets, but we might do the flip if it's like overwhelmingly you guys are saying that seems like the better move. Part of me feels like it is, but this is branding and all that stuff. That is where I am at my most doubtful and afraid. So in this particular instance, I really am looking for some feedback. But thank you. I understand exactly where you're coming from. From Riley Hop. Next year will be the greatest MVP race of all time. A slim Luka will be seeking revenge and torch the whole league. Giannis will put up a career year as he puts forth a Herculean effort to lift Milwaukee. SGA will continue to perform at his MVP caliber level while leading OKC to a high 60-win pace, and Jokic will continue to warp offense in a way that we have never seen before. I could also see some young guys like Wemby, Cade, or Paolo making some noise if they can take their teams to the next level, but not anything major. Yeah, I'd be shocked if any of those guys, maybe Wemby. I really don't think Cade or Paolo. I think if the Pistons or the Magic are really successful, they will be more so not like because they're getting carried, but because those guys are just good and the rest of the roster is good. But I see where you're coming from. I said that Giannis will win MVP this year because of that carry job effort, but Luka, Jokic, SGA, and Giannis will all be putting forth a really good case. If I had to predict who would kind of fall out of favor there, it'll probably be Jokic. I think the Nuggets got better in the regular season, so they're not gonna have to rely on him to the same degree in which they have the last couple of years. I also think Shea would I think it's gonna be Luka and Giannis. Like if I have to predict the MVP, I think it will be Luka or Giannis, but I can get behind the idea that this will be one of the best. It's hard to think. There are not many MVP years where you go into it and you're like, man, there's 4 dudes who could be on pretty fucking equal footing by the time the year is over. Usually due to circumstances, whether it be injuries or narratives, we kind of know who the MVP, at least top 2 candidates are going to be. I could really see all 4 of those guys having strong cases and the voters being pretty split when the final decision comes to it. Could be a fucking shit show, to be honest. From old school handles, Luka Doncic not winning the 2024 MVP is flat out ludicrous. The man didn't even finish second. Luka put up a 34-point triple-double pace, dragging the Mavericks to a top seed contender spot and doing it with a revolving door of role players around him. Yeah, so despite the fact that I am happy to tell you that Jokic is the best player in the NBA and it's not particularly close, I do not subscribe to the ideology that the MVP should always strictly go to the best player. I think who is the better player and who is having the better season are not one and the same. Those are not the same conversation. And if that was the case, the MVP historically would look very different than it is. And I am personally not in favor of changing that precedent. So Luka Doncic abso-fucking-lutely should have won the 2024 MVP. The numbers he put up were absurd. Like, not only did he put up 34 a game, he shot like 80% at the rim and had one of the greatest three-point shooting seasons of all time. In 23-24, 10.6 three-point attempts per game, 38.2% from outside. He is shooting 3% above league average, taking 10 threes a game. That is on par with the James Harden season. Not quite on par with the Steph Curry season, but at least that volume is. Steph would just shoot like 3% better. But he's also doing that. And I bring up James Harden for a reason. 23-24, this man, 30% of his threes were assisted. He shot 38% on 10 threes a game, with 7 out of every 10 3 that he took being off the dribble. Do you know how fucking nuts that is? And then also, yes, 84% at the basket. 84% at the rim. That's nuts. Also, 57% from floater range, which is like over 10%, like 15% above league average. Like, oh my God, he couldn't have had a much better season. And then just to give you the counting stats, 34 points, 9.8 assists, 9.2 rebounds. My man is 0.8 rebounds a game and 0.2 assists a game away from a 34 point triple double where he shot nearly 50% from the field and nearly 40% from three. Also had a career year, 78.6% of the free throw line. Not the best, but better than he ever did. That guy finished third in MVP. How? The Dallas Mavericks won 50 games. They were like the third seed in the West, and it's a fucking impossible ass West at that. It's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable. Like, I'm not saying Jokic didn't also have a great season. Of course he did. He was the best player in the NBA, but he averaged 8 less points per game than him. 8 less points, more rebounds, of course, but less assists, same amount of steals. He did shoot 10% better from the field, but that's because he was only taking 2.9 3-point attempts per game. Even if we get into the shooting splits that particular year, he shot 61% from floater range, which is 4% better than Luka, but he shot 10% worse at the rim as a big man. Yeah, like, I don't understand. I just don't. I really, really do not understand that MVP going to Jokic. I also have said that I thought Giannis should win one of his, and I was very staunchly a defender that Shea should have won it this previous year. So if you want to call me a Jokic hater for that, you can do it. But like, straight up, I do not understand how Luka didn't win the 2024 MVP. In fact, that might be the MVP that I am most bothered by since I've started covering the NBA as a career, like since 2018, basically. Technically started 2016, but we don't got to talk about those days. I was a fucking child. Unbelievable to me. I always knew that I felt this way, but you really got me to sit in it for a minute. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. It's so insane. Denver won 7 more games. Give me a break. That's so fucking ridiculous. Also, the Nuggets were the 8th best defense in the NBA that season, and the Mavericks were the 18th. And both Jokic and Luka are not particularly good defenders, and Jokic is playing the worst position to be a not very good defender. So he also had way better help defensively and offensively. I mean, he didn't have anyone as good as Kyrie, but the system at large, the way the players fit along with him, that was also better. I don't get it. I really fucking don't get it. I'll highlight this real quick from Justin Ellis. Don't really have a hot take because I'm still just a casual, but I just wanted to say thanks, Rusty. Your content has helped me get back into basketball. That is awesome to hear. My number one goal with what I do, I love basketball. I want more people to love basketball and talk about it positively, because the amount of negativity that exists around it, there's no justification for it. There's no reason to be this pissy and upset about a game as much as people are. At the end of the day, we're watching grown men who make millions of dollars dribbling a basketball. Chill out. Jalen Green is just Gen Z Monte Ellis. That's funny. I think Monte Ellis was better, though. But maybe Jalen Green will be better in a couple of years to where that comparison is more apt. This one's interesting. Oh, man. It's long. This video is already running long. It was also 2 weeks since the last one, so maybe I'll let you get a little bit longer of one. But from Become Don't Chase, Isaiah Thomas was robbed of the 2017 MVP. IT led the Celtics to the #1 seed in the East while being 5'8" in a league full of defenders a whole foot taller than him. I don't think we appreciate how insane that is. He averaged almost 30 points per game, carrying the entire offense without a co-star. None of his teammates averaged over 17 points per game. Who the fuck even would have averaged 17 on that team? Am I like Al Horford? Surely not. It wouldn't be Al Horford. And Jaylen Brown, that was his rookie year. Who the fuck averaged 17? Avery Bradley averaged 16. Yeah, Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder combining for 30 a game. Al Horford put up 14. Yeah, Yeah, not much help. You're right. People went crazy over Russ because of the KD narrative and because he averaged a triple double. Don't get me wrong, it's a great achievement, but let's be real. He was stat padding like crazy, highest usage rate in NBA history, and his efficiency was awful like normal. Not to mention, Russ still holds the record for most turnovers, which he broke in his MVP season, and the Thunder also won less games than the Celtics because that normally seems to matter. Well, it's also the West versus the East. You do have to factor that in. Like, the number one seed in the East is not nearly as impressive as the number one seed in the West. Not that that was a particularly weak Eastern Conference with the Cavaliers also being there, but it was not a very good one. For the Russ MVP, I feel like Russ won that MVP the moment that Kevin Durant announced his decision, because he had already shown before that he was capable of averaging a triple-double. I think it was the season Durant got that foot injury. Like, he played like 30 games at the end of the year after he returned from an injury and basically put up a triple-double. Let me see if I can find this specific stat, because this is from 2015 that he did this. Well, not quite 10 rebounds, but for his last 25 games at the tail end of OKC's 2015 season, he averaged 31.6 points, 9.6 assists, and 8.8 rebounds. So the prospect of him averaging a triple-double was discussed before the season even started, and then he did it, and then there was the Kevin Durant narrative. So I do feel like that MVP was kind of always going to Russ. I still would give it to James Harden. I understand your argument about his height, though, just being like, dude, this is the impossible happening right now. This doesn't even make any fucking sense. Let's give him the award. I 100% understand why that would be your perspective, but I'm also not one to use that type of like angle. Like, I don't think you should be punished, nor do I think you should get some extra praise because of your physical limitations or your strengths. Like, that's on, obviously it's much different being 6'5" versus 5'8", but people were like, James Harden should win MVP over Giannis because Giannis has more physical advantages. If we're going to do that, it's discourse is done. Like, we're not punishing height for that. And like, overall, I think James Harden and Russell Westbrook did have better seasons than Isaiah Thomas. Maybe not as impressive, but they had better seasons, and that is, to me, more important. But if the impressive factor, like, I don't agree, but I understand where you're coming from. I think that is a completely reasonable take. I just don't agree, but I just don't value this particular facet of it nearly as much as you do. But I understand 100% where you're coming from. From Herb, the hypocrisy where NBA influencers always complain about how biased the media is towards a few teams, while also all the major YouTubers are fans of the same teams that the media supports, is frustrating sometimes. Well, I don't think it's hypocritical to be a fan of those teams. You can still be a fan of those teams and support the idea of coverage for teams beyond yours, because also, like, being the focus of the media is a double-edged sword. There's also a lot of very annoying things that can come from that. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan. They've been fucking terrible my entire time covering them. I think 3 months of my entire YouTube career, the Bulls were good, and what an amazing 3 months those were for me. But otherwise, like, that hasn't been an issue. There are guys who are Lakers fans who are key. Like, it's fine. What matters is their actual coverage. What team you're a fan of doesn't matter. Like, it's okay to be a Lakers fan. You can still do that and advocate for better coverage for the league at large. I don't think hypocrisy is the word that is used. I think it just happens to be. Like, there are also plenty of creators who are fans of teams that are not big markets, like Three Cone. He's an OKC Thunder fan, but they won a championship, so it's also fuck him, I guess. But like, there are people who are fans of lower level teams everywhere. It's just less of them are prominent NBA YouTubers, but I don't know. I'm far more tapped out as to who the major players in the YouTube landscape is now versus what it was back then. It was a lot more simple. I wasn't quite an OG for NBA YouTube, but I was. It's been long enough now that I kind of am, but like. I came up at a time where there were like 5 other NBA YouTubers with over 100,000 followers. Now it's just unbelievable. Video is over. This one went way too long. I'm so drained of energy. Goodbye.